Oh, it's another edition of the Friday Football Hangout. Good afternoon, good morning, I should say. I'm Dave Morris here on NewsOK.com. It's the Friday Football Hangout because, after all, it is Friday. We will talk football, and we're using a Google Hangout to chat with our columnists and reporters as OU and OSU prepare for battle on Saturday. But this morning, we are joined by Jason Kersey. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. I think you're down in the patio room here at Opubco, right?
I am. That's correct.
And Gina Mizell, who is in Stillwater, a festive Stillwater this weekend, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's a rainy Stillwater, which isn't great for the homecoming walk around and festivities tonight, but maybe this rain will clear out by the time folks get up here. But yeah, always an exciting weekend when homecoming comes around, and a big game on Saturday for the Cowboys.
Gina, let's just stay with you and talk about Stillwater. What is the vibe up there? They were off last week, but now they're back in action, and it's homecoming weekend.
Yeah, very interesting, especially given what happened last week in the Big 12 with Texas obviously blowing out OU, and Kansas State hung with Baylor for most of that game, and Texas Tech struggled with Iowa State, and TCU struggled with Kansas. And so it's been very interesting because after the loss at West Virginia 3 weeks ago, and then the loss or the close win against Kansas State 2 weeks ago, some OSU fans were thinking, oh my gosh, this team's going to struggle to make a bowl game. There's no chance for the Big 12 championship. And then all that madness happens during their off week, and now people suddenly are like, well, we're right back in this race, I think. So this is a huge game against TCU, a team that has also struggled offensively. And so I think, this is a really important game as far as the conference season goes.
OSU is 4-1. Texas Christian is 3-3. Kickoff is 11 a.m. in Stillwater. You can watch that in Oklahoma City, KOKH Channel 25, Fox, or 12 on the Cox stations. Gina, let's just stay with that topic real fast. Is this a knockout game in the Big 12 title race?
I think it is. I think it's particularly for TCU, since they already have 2 losses in conference play to Texas Tech and Oklahoma. If they want any shot at being in contention for the Big 12 championship come November, that they got to win this game. And I think it's very similar for Oklahoma State too, just based on who is still to come up on their schedule. I mean, they still have to play Baylor, they still have to play OU, they still have to play at Texas Tech, they've got to play at Texas. So if they lose 2 games to West Virginia and TCU, 2 teams that aren't really regarded as true contenders right now, that doesn't set up well for them. So yeah, this is a big game for both teams, and I think it's going to be a good one.
It's the Friday Football Hangout here on NewsOK.com. I'm Dave Morris. I'm joined right now by Gina Mizell and Jason Kersey. Gina covers the OSU Cowboys, and Jason covers the OU Sooners. Barry Tramel, Jenny Carlson could join us at any point in this hangout, so stand by. Jason, let's go over to you at this point. The Sooners and Jayhawks, that's a 2:30 game on ESPN, and the Sooners will be looking to rebound, Jason, from that game against Texas.
Yeah, definitely. And this is sort of the perfect opponent, I think, for Oklahoma to bounce back from that game. That a pretty embarrassing loss to Texas, a game everybody expected them to win, and they go down there and really didn't play well in most aspects of the game. But they get a chance against a team in Kansas that hasn't won a Big 12 game in a couple of years and is struggling. And so I think this is the perfect bounce back game, and especially for Blake Bell.
Let's talk about Blake Bell. How much pressure do you think is on this young man?
I think quite a bit of pressure. I don't see him losing the quarterback job, barring an injury. But I think that he's got to bounce back from in this game. Against Notre Dame, he looked really good. Against Tulsa, he looked really good. TCU, he didn't look great, but he didn't have any bad turnovers. Against Texas, he didn't look great, and he had bad turnovers. I think that this game is going to be really important, not only for his confidence, but just to get things back going in the passing game, which has been so important for OU over the last several years.
Jason, we'll stick with you for a second as we're watching footage from the OU-Texas game now, shot by Damon Fontenot when he was down there. What are the coaches saying about Blake Bell?
They talk like they really have confidence in him. Josh Heupel said that he doesn't feel like Blake's that far off. He said he thinks that there's kind of a fine line between being good and not so good, and he thinks that sometimes that's a little bit tough for those on the outside to see. But he thinks that they're not really as far off as maybe some people think they are to being able to connect on some of those passes that Blake was messed up on. And the truth is, he was really pretty. even against TCU, I felt like for the most part he was pretty poised. He lost that against Texas, so he's going to have to get that back.
Barry Tramel has joined us here on the Friday Football Hangout. This is newsok.com, and you can participate in this hangout by going to newsok.com/live and submit some questions. And if you do so, I'll pass those along to Gina, Jason, and Barry. Barry, I was reading your blog that you posted on News OK today about 1957 and how Texas and Notre Dame were kind of lightly regarded, but they came into the OU game that year. There are some similarities.
Yeah, they each came in with 2 losses. OU was a huge favorite in both games, and frankly, the 57 Sooners sort of went on and had a really good year. That was their only loss. We'll see how the 2013 Sooners do. You look at that game on Saturday and you think, well, these 2 teams are even, or Texas is better. But the evidence to this point is not strong that Texas can do this on a consistent basis. And we talk about Blake Bell. What's he going to do? Well, I mean, we're all down on him, me included. But the number 2 rated quarterback in the Big 12 as we speak is Blake Bell in passing efficiency. So that says as much about the league as it does Blake Bell. But somebody's got to be number 2, and it's Blake Bell. So I think, I don't think there's any reason to toss him overboard right now. I think the coaches are probably making the right move, sticking with Blake Bell. I think J.K.'s right. I think the Bell didn't play great against TCU, but did keep his poise for the most part. So that's a very good defense. So I think there's a lot to build on with Blake Bell. But I also think he needs to play well Saturday, or the doubt is going to just increase.
And not only the doubt, but perhaps those who are always looking for the second string quarterback to come in. I'm Dave Morris. This is the Friday Football Hangout on newsok.com. Again, you can submit your questions at newsok.com/live, and I'll pass those along. Barry, I'll ask you a question I asked Gina before you logged in about the OSU game, and that is this OSU versus Texas Christian a knockout game in the Big 12 title race?
Well, it is for OSU, no doubt. TCU's probably got themselves knocked out already with the 2-loss start. However, I mean, there's a school of thought that we thought it was going to be last year, but it definitely could be this year. We could have a champion with 2 losses. In 2010, we had 5 teams finish at 6-2 in the Big 12. 3 tied for the South Division, 2 teams tied for the North Division. Lots of parity, and I would argue there's even more parity this year because the bottom teams are closer to the top teams now than they were then. So I guess TCU could still make a run. They'd have to win in Stillwater and then beat Texas next week. If they did that, they'd have a fighting chance. But clearly the Cowboys have got to win, and Cowboys have got to start playing better. When I eliminate OSU as a title threat, I don't eliminate them because of who they played or who they still have to play. They just haven't played well. 2 straight games, West Virginia was awful, K-State was mediocre, and they got to play better than that, particularly offensively. So if they could win Saturday and make some ground up offensively, well then I think you can put OSU back in the title hunt.
The fact is, OSU and OU both only have 1 loss. Gina, let's go back to you and talk about your pregame story. You're talking about 2 cornerbacks, one from Texas Christian and one from OSU.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, obviously they're not going to go head-to-head. It's not a typical matchup, so to speak. But Jason Barrett from TCU is regarded as possibly the best defensive back in the country. Certainly an All-American candidate and a Thorpe Award candidate. And he's kind of, a known commodity and might be the best player overall in the Big 12. And then on the other side, you've got Justin Gilbert, who's really had a kind of a resurgent senior season after such a disappointing season last year. And so I talked to him and I talked to cornerbacks coach Van Malone just about what's kind of changed with him. And he's really worked on his technique. The more aggressive style of defense that Oklahoma State is playing, the more bump and run press coverage, that really caters a lot to his athletic ability. But what cornerbacks coach Van Malone said is that Gilbert has really worked hard on when he's not playing man coverage, when there is a little bit more of a cushion and his technique and how he breaks to the football and just knowing where everybody else is playing, so he knows where his safety help is and those types of things. So Justin Gilbert, after kind of toying with the idea of jumping to the NFL last year, he looks like a pretty good pro prospect right now. Mel Kiper's got him as the 9th best cornerback available in the draft, and and Verrett is number 7. So you've got 2 really good defensive back pro prospects, and based on how poor these 2 offenses have played so far in the Big 12 season, you could pretty much I think those 2 are gonna lock some more receivers down. You could kind of call Boone Pickens Stadium a no-fly zone here coming up on Saturday.
Very good. 2 players to keep an eye on this Saturday, and that pregame story will be written by Gina Mizell. Look for that in Saturday's edition of the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com. We were watching some footage there of Oklahoma State against Kansas State. Barry, I'll come back to you because you wrote in your prediction of the TCU at OSU game, the Cowboys had trouble moving the ball on West Virginia and Kansas State, but TCU's defense is a big upgrade.
Yeah, TCU's got, in my opinion, the best defense in the Big 12. So I think Cowboys are going to have to try something else on offense. I mean, clearly the deep ball is not there because of JW's limitations, but they were very effective offensively last season when he quarterbacked. So it's not all on him. I think the running game has hit a snag. I think the receivers have got to do a better job. They're very good at receiver, but they've still got to do a better job. And I think Mike Yursich can do some things with the hurry up, the up tempo. I'd like to see JW get more involved in the run game. I think when you have a running quarterback who can't necessarily throw the 25-yard square out, I think you got to run him. So I'd like to see JW get 10 to 12 carries on Saturday. I think they got to try to do something to get this offense going again, because TCU, as we've seen, they'll play punt with you all day. They don't mind going 1, 2, 3 kick and then doing the same to you. So I think Cowboys have to try to find a way to get some big plays going. TCU typically doesn't blitz a lot. OSU's not had great success against the blitz this year, but if the Frogs do come, I think JW's got to find a way to slip some screens into Josh Stewart and Des Rowland, whoever might be in the game plan. So they got to take advantage of this, whatever few holes are in the TCU defense.
Gina, who is to blame for OSU's offensive struggles? Is it J.W. Walsh? Is it Mike Yursich, the offensive line, Jeremy Smith? What do you think on this?
I mean, I think there's plenty of blame to go around. A lot of people like to put it on Yursich and the play calling, and he's kind of an easy target because he's new and obviously came from a Division II school, and people want to say clearly he's not ready for this opportunity yet. But I mean, Barry touched on a lot of it already. I mean, J.W. Walsh is clearly limited throwing the football, but he was also limited throwing the football last year, maybe even more so. I mean, I do think his arm strength and his accuracy is a little bit better this year, that he has made improvements in that area. But, you got to start with the offensive line. That's clearly been an issue, especially at right guard, and that hasn't helped protect J.W. Walsh. He's had to kind of, be on the move, and the pocket has collapsed on a lot of occasions. And Jeremy Smith hasn't really been able to get things going, although he did look much better against Kansas State than at West Virginia. They've kind of been trying to get him back to just the one cut and get upfield type of mentality. So, again, there's plenty of blame to go around, and it's been kind of interesting. I asked Mike Yursich just kind of about how the mood in his offensive staff room has been lately, and just kind of how Gundy has been giving input on offense. And he said it's been about as productive as it could be. It's been about as positive as it could be, that guys aren't thinking that the sky is falling or anything like that. So with the week off and with maybe some time to get some of these receivers that were out, get them healed up, I'm curious to see how much tempo they go, how up tempo they go, what they throw in the game plan, and how they try to attack this really good TCU defense.
That's Gina Mizell. She is in Stillwater. The Cowboys are there for homecoming weekend, and this weekend they host Texas Christian. That kickoff is at 11 a.m. Let's go back to Jason Kersey as Oklahoma is at Kansas this weekend. That's a 2:30 p.m. kickoff. Jason, what are you writing about in advance of this game for tomorrow?
Well, I'm sort of writing about the Sooner search for an offensive identity. At the beginning of the season, with Trevor Knight as the quarterback, we thought that there was going to, and it was clear they wanted to run the zone read option plays. They wanted to really have that mobile quarterback be a major part of the offense. With Blake Bell, they've kind of gone away from some of that. To many fans' surprise, especially considering Blake Bell can run, and Texas was so susceptible to running quarterbacks, but they decided not to do much of that last weekend. So I think they're still just trying to figure out exactly what they are as an offense, what they're good at. The receivers, they've got Sterling Shepard and Jalen Saunders, two dynamic playmakers who haven't really been able to get that much involved. And Blake Bell struggled to throw the ball a little bit, but they've got a bunch of good running backs. So I think that they're just sort of feeling their way through this, and it's 6 games in, so they're going to have to figure it out pretty fast if they're going to have any shot to win the Big 12.
It is kind of the midterm report at this point, but that was a lot of the feedback from fans on Twitter is, why isn't Blake Bell running more? What do the coaches say this week?
Well, one thing that Josh Heupel said was that they ran some option plays against Texas, but the way Texas lined up, the way the players reacted to the plays, the Texas players reacted. The read was for Blake to give the ball to the running back. So it maybe didn't appear like there were very many quarterback runs, but there could have been more depending on what Texas had done. So that's sort of what they said. But still, I think that they should have tried to get Blake more involved running the ball, because Texas, to that point in the season, had given up over 100 yards a game rushing to quarterbacks, and Oklahoma didn't seem to make much of an effort to exploit that.
You mentioned Jalen Saunders there a minute ago. You have a note in today's paper about how teams are limiting his punt returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, teams know what he's capable of in the return game. Last year against Oklahoma State, he returned a punt over 80 yards for a touchdown that got Oklahoma back in that game in the fourth quarter when without that they may have lost that Bedlam game. And this year, he really hadn't gotten that many opportunities. Teams have punted to OU 40 times, and Jalen Saunders only has 10 returns. He's had to fair catch a lot of them because of the way they're kicking it. And so there's really, Bob Stoops said there's really not a whole lot anybody can do about that. That's just sort of the way it's got to be. But I think that's going to be important too, is finding ways to get Jalen Saunders more involved, because the guy can make plays with the ball in his hand.
It's the Friday Football Hangout. I'm Dave Morris here on newsok.com. Submit your questions on newsok.com/live, and we do have a few questions now. I'm joined by Barry Tramel, Gina Mizell, and Jason Kersey. We're talking OU and OSU football. And Gina, I'll come back to you. One of the comments says 5 of 6 teams have had much better success passing against TCU than they have rushing. How does Walsh do against that secondary?
That's a great point. And actually, on the Oklahoma State blog right now, I asked the TCU beat writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Stephen Stevenson. I said, okay, where is this defense susceptible? Everyone talks about, just how good this unit is. And he said they're a little bit susceptible to big plays, which is kind of surprising given how good Jason Verrett is and that secondary is. But, that really doesn't cater to Walsh's strength, which would be throwing the football deep. So I think Barry made a great point about just, getting him more involved in the rushing attack, even though they are such a great rushing defense. I think you got to do that with Walsh. And then, if they do try to blitz or try to bring pressure, you got to get those short and intermediate routes going with those receivers and just try to, maybe attack them that way. And then maybe if you're able to do that, then maybe something does break deep and J.W. Walsh is able to find someone deep down the field. So, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see how this unit comes out and what they try to dial up. They've had 2 weeks to prepare, and that obviously didn't work so well against West Virginia a couple weeks ago when they were coming off a bye week. So I'm curious to see the adjustments that they've made and how this all goes down tomorrow.
Gina, another comment on newsok.com/live. The comment from the guest says, how big of a factor will the crowd be at Boone Pickens Stadium? K-State got several false start penalties. Will TCU be backed up due to crowd noise and false starts? And I believe I read that there may be a record crowd at Boone Pickens Stadium this weekend. Yeah,
that's another great point by whoever submitted that comment. The crowd was certainly a factor against K-State a couple weeks ago. Sometimes it's difficult for us in the press box to tell just how loud it is, but Mike Gundy said that it was definitely a factor and was clearly hurting those K-State offensive linemen and the quarterback Daniel Sams and Jake Waters and so if there's a record crowd, I'm sure there will be a ton of people here with it being homecoming, and if it's a record crowd, if the stadium's full, if it's rocking, if people are up and at it early enough for this 11 a.m. kick time, I think this will be a really good atmosphere, and I think people realize what a big game this is. There haven't been many home games so far this season for the Cowboys, so I would expect them to be out in full force, and certainly that can impact the visiting team.
It's an 11 a.m. kickoff in Stillwater. Barry, you wrote that Gundy doesn't mind the morning Cowboys.
Mike Gundy likes day games. He likes.
I think a lot of sports reporters probably like the day games too,
right?
I
do too. Sign me up for those.
You know what? We like 11 and we like night games. We don't like that 2:30 stuff because that kills your whole day.
Good luck, Jason.
And frankly, the older I get, the less I mind writing on deadline because if you give me 3 hours to write something, I'll take it. But if you give me 30 minutes, that's fine too. But Gundy, think about what football teams go through on game day when there's a night game, especially if you're on the road. But it's home games as well. You get up, you go to breakfast, you have a meeting, you go back to the hotel, you lay around for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes. And it's miserable. Whereas if you got an early kickoff, get up, eat breakfast, have a meeting, go to the ballpark, play a game, and you're through the rest of the day. If you're at home, if not, you get on the bus, go to the airport. Sometimes you're home before sundown. So if you're a participant, you love day games. Now, coaches could fix a lot of this if they wouldn't be so controlling, and especially at home, just say, guys, be here at 2:00 tomorrow. Go do whatever you want to. Go with your girlfriend or go do your homework or whatever you want to do. But I'm still looking for the coach willing to do that. So, Gundy likes the day games, and you can't blame him.
Sticking with you, Barry, you wrote, and shifting back to the OU-Kansas game, you wrote the Kansas defense is not half bad. You're saying the Sooners might struggle offensively for a third straight week.
Well, if they don't play better, they will. Kansas is not bad on offense. I mean, they played Tech really tough, and then it got away from them at the end in the second half, and they got blitzed. But they went to Fort Worth and got beat just 27-17. So they've stayed in that game. They're terrible on offense. I mean, I could see the Sooners shutting them out, but they're pretty good on defense. They're not bad on defense. So if the Sooners struggle for a third straight week, that's a terrible sign. A terrible sign.
You're watching the Friday Football Hangout. I'm Dave Morris here on newsok.com. You can participate as well. Go to newsok.com/live. And guys, I'll pass this along. The sports editor Mike Sherman, who usually and capably and ably hosts this show, says he's watching from his iPhone and enjoying the show. So shout out to Mike Sherman there. He'll be back next week, I'm sure. I'm joined today by Barry Tramel, Gina Mizell.
Maybe he's Wally Pipp. You ever heard of Wally Pipp?
Yes, in this case, probably not.
Well, maybe so. Wally Pipp probably didn't think he was Wally Pipp until Lou Gehrig walked in the door.
Again, Barry Tramel, Gina Mizell, and Jason Kersey are here. I want to touch on this briefly. The College Football Playoff Committee. Your thoughts, Barry?
I thought it's a fantastic committee. Really hard-pressed to think of anything that upsets me about the committee. Wouldn't have minded if it was a little smaller, 13 people, a little heavy. I'd prefer 9 or 11. But I like the mix of people. They got an AD from each of the major conferences. They got a couple of former players that, pretty honorable, a couple of former coaches. Tom Osborne, Archie Manning, hardly anybody's ever said a bad word about those guys. Condoleezza Rice appears to have an impressive resume. I think somebody that's been on the National Security Council with the mission of letting the United States know what's going on with Soviet Russia, I think she can handle deciding between Oregon and Ohio State. So,
hey Barry, give us a quick overview of this committee, when it goes into effect, and what their role will be.
Well, they're basically just going to pick the 14 field. It goes into effect next season. The BCS is gone after this year. Next season, there'll be 4 teams in the college football playoff, and this committee on the Sunday following the first Saturday of December will meet and decide the 4 teams. Now, they'll meet periodically through the year. They're going to do a little poll periodically to let teams know where they're at, where they stand. But it's going to function very much like the college basketball committee that we know so well that puts together March Madness and the NCAA tournament. So I think we're going to see a lot more spotlight on this committee because the fifth team in the college football playoff is going to be decimated, whereas you're about the 35th at-large team in the NCAA tournament, so you don't have a lot of gripe. So there'll be some good controversy, but I like the polls have outlived their usefulness. They're nonsensical. The computers are very schizo. I don't know that any of us have ever gotten a grasp around the computers. I like this committee. If you're going to have a if you're going to have a playoff that is picked, that's not earned, you don't earn your way in, somebody decides, then I think this is a good way to make the decision.
Do you think 4 teams are enough? Or is this just a starting point?
I think eventually we'll go bigger, but it's going to be a while. It's contractual through 2025 that this is how many we'll have, and they seem pretty dogmatic. I doubt we expand before 2026.
Hey, Gina and Jason, what's the feeling in Stillwater and Norman about the football committee? Gina, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I asked Mike Gundy about it on Monday, actually, and he said he hadn't really followed it too closely. And the one thing that he's always said about it is something that Barry just brought up, is that he thinks that it might be too many people. When you have that many voices in a room, there's bound to be some arguments and things like that. So that was kind of the one thing that he brought up was that he thought that maybe 13 people is too many. But I think I'm with Barry. I think it's a good mix. I mean, people are always going to come out and say that so-and-so has a bias, so-and-so has this, so-and-so has that. Well, the bottom line is that everybody is from somewhere. Everybody went to a college, most likely, and has ties there. Everybody lives somewhere. So, I mean, we all have connections to certain things. So as long as you get a variety of people that aren't all going to lean one way or the other way, then I think you're in good shape. So, yeah, that's my thought on it. And I think, Mike Gundy doesn't really have many thoughts on it yet. At least he didn't on Monday. But he kind of thought that the number of people was maybe too large. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out, if there are any big throwdowns that we hear about who gets in that last spot or something like that.
I can see that, walking into a 13-person committee meeting, and it's like the Snickers commercial, not going anywhere for a while. Hey,
right.
Hey, Jason,
I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Oh, no kidding. Maybe they could live stream it for us.
There you go.
Jason, the feeling in Norman on the football committee?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that Bob Stoops has said pretty consistently since last summer was that he was worried about what Gina just said, that everybody sort of has a bias, whether it's where you went to college, whether it's where you are. I mean, even, and one point he made last summer was, even the reporters who try to remain unbiased. I mean, we watch Big 12 football all the time, so I think that there's concern that we would naturally, maybe be inclined to think that way. So, and I think that's probably a fair point. So that's one thing. Now, when I asked him about that on Wednesday, he acted like I don't care about any of that. But, that's just him. But
it's the Bob Stoops answer.
Yeah. But I think another thing that he's mainly Hello.
I think Barry was going to interject, but
I was going to say something, JK, and this goes back to Gundy. Gundy saying he hadn't followed it, and Stoops saying I don't really care. How can these guys not care?
They do.
This is their livelihood. This is a paramount decision. We've seen it happen to Stoops 3 or 4 times, a BCS decision. Gundy once. I mean, these guys' careers ride sometimes on what this committee's going to decide. How could they say they don't pay any attention to it or don't care?
Well, these guys.
Yeah, Barry, you were standing right there when I asked Mike about it. So
it's nonsensical. Yeah.
All right, it's the Friday Football Hangout. I'm going to ask Barry one more question, and then we'll get to predictions. And Barry, this question comes from none other than Wally Pipp, who logged on to News OK and said, ask Barry why Stoops wouldn't use the KU game as a chance to experiment.
Well, maybe I think he will. That experiment doesn't necessarily mean another quarterback. I think you'll see some offensive changes. I don't know what they are, but I don't think you'll see the Sooners go back to the same old. But I do think this. I think the Sooners have discovered through half a season how important is the forward pass. And even though we love running quarterbacks, and every time the Sooners get lit up by one, we say, they need a running quarterback. But the most important offensive weapon in 20.
Uh-oh.
We may have lost to Barry Tramel right there, and he was right in the middle of a very important point. All right, so we're going to kick it back to Jason Kersey and end this on predictions. Jason, your thoughts on... Whoa, wait a minute. Jason, back to you. Your thoughts on Saturday's game for OU.
Yeah, I think the Sooners win. I picked 45-14. I think Blake Bell is going to get back on track, and I think that the Sooners will bounce back from last week's game. Now the question is, how much do you really know about this team by beating up on Kansas? And I don't think we're going to know much. I think we'll learn a whole lot more about them next week when they host Texas Tech.
Gina, we'll come your way in Stillwater. Your thoughts on the game against Texas Christian?
Yeah, I picked OSU to win 23-16. Again, I think both of these offenses will struggle a little bit, and it might come down to which team scores a defensive touchdown. And I like the Cowboys to do that potentially. If it comes down to that, just based on they forced 5 turnovers against Kansas State 2 weeks ago, and have done a really good job of kind of being good playmakers there on that side of the football. So I like OSU at home by 7. But I know Barry picked this as an upset special, so I would not be surprised if TCU came in here and won either.
You're looking at those graphics there, the press row graphics. You can catch Barry Tramel and Jenny Carlson on the press row every week on newsok.com, sponsored by our friends at Papa John's. I'm not sure if Barry is with us or not, or if he's just sitting really still. But I can tell you Barry's predictions, TCU at OSU. He had the Horned Frogs, as Gina mentioned, the upset special. Horned Frogs winning that game 23-20. And in Lawrence, Kansas, he had the Sooners winning 28-7. Gina, you may be the only one still live with me, so thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the homecoming weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thanks for your time and expertise today. We appreciate it. This has been the Friday Football Hangout. I've been joined by Barry Tramel, Gina Mizell, and Jason Kersey. It's been produced by Todd Frazier and Greg Singleton. Big shout out to those guys. Thanks for their help. And thanks for tuning in today to the Friday Football Hangout. I'm Dave Morris. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy the football, everyone.